The Illy story started in 1933 with a single cafe. Within 2 years, founder Francesco Illy developed the blueprint for modern espresso machines, revolutionizing how coffee was made. Since then, the business has grown into a global enterprise, selling its products in 100,000 bars and restaurants in 140 countries. But some things haven't changed. It remains a family-run operation. Today, on Leaders with Lacqua, we meet Andrea Illy, the chairman of Illy. So thank you so much for joining us. Italian coffee has always been a thing. When did this coffee craze infect other parts of the world?
Well, as a matter of fact, espresso started to become global in the 80s and 90s. It started maybe with us, maybe, I don't know, because we started exporting Italian espresso to the US in the mid-80s. And after that, there has been a big boom. I don't pretend that we have been the trigger, but for some reason we were there at that time.
But do you know why? So have the tastes of people changed? Even in London 25 years ago, it was still quite tough to find a decent cup of coffee, and now every street corner has something good to offer.
Yes, I would say the overall experience besides the taste, because before that time in the US it was not possible to get decent coffee out of home. And even in restaurants, coffee was served, drip coffee for free. They didn't charge you. This can imagine the quality it was. And other than that, you could go to a deli to get some really lousy boiled coffee sitting for hours. So the cafes, the brilliant idea was to kind of replicate the Italian Italian coffee bar model, and then adapt it to the United States, making coffee much more proximal for consumers. And of course, because these Italian bars were centered about the Italian espresso, the proposal was the authentic one initially. But then there has been a kind of a little bit of a pushback from the American consumer to that, let's say, high body, concentrated Italian espresso. So cappuccino was the boom, cappuccino and latte. Americans are great, let's say, milk drinkers. So this espresso-based drinks became the success.
Who's your biggest competitor? Is Starbucks their competitor, or do they have just a different offering?
Our job is to avoid any direct competition. So if we see that somebody is coming in our turf, then we try to move away.
Which means
what? That
higher?
means that we have 1,000 of competitors or none. Starbucks that you mentioned, not necessarily, because they are really in a different business. They are retailers. Their core business is really operating their own coffee shops, the several thousands they have, or tens of thousands they have all over the world. We are not in the same business.
Okay, so what's your business? High-end? Is it for restaurants? Is it for bars? Is it for consumption at home?
No, the dream upon which my grandfather founded the company was to offer the greatest coffee to the world. And this dream is now, let's say, converted in our mission, which is clearly to be leader in quality. We seek the best possible quality, working hand in hand with our coffee growers, developing technology and experiences in order to enhance this coffee experience. This is what we do. And we don't seek for volume, we don't seek, nothing else than the quality leadership.
Does it mean that you can also have higher margins because you charge more?
Yes, we charge more, definitely, but the goal is to have a sustainable, let's say, supply chain, to really be a stakeholder company in which, for which the profit is a is not an end. So, for sure, a different model from the so-called shareholder company one. Stakeholders are all parties which are directly or indirectly involved in the business, and we have a hierarchy. Consumer, customer, the talent working for us, suppliers without whom we wouldn't have this great coffee, the communities, and at the bottom of that pyramid, the shareholder, which is our family, supporting the business, not trying to pull out let's say, resources from that.
Okay, how tough is it working for a family-run business? Do you always have to get along, or do you have to get independent advice? How does it work?
Well, it is, of course, a great responsibility because there is a legacy, 2 generations already, and the next generation ready to start working in the business. So, because it's not only a family business, it also has the family name. So this is double responsibility. So my job is to grow the company by maintaining it consistent with the legacy and with our tradition. So it's a constantly reinterpreted tradition that we are looking for, and maintaining uncompromised quality and ethical, let's say, standards. This is, you need to sacrifice from time to time. You need to sacrifice volumes, you need to sacrifice profits, you need to sacrifice time and also freedom, but this is really worth doing.
You talk about not having real competitors and yet having 1,000 competitors.
We try not to.
You try not to, but with the 1,000 competitors on different sections, I guess, are there too many coffee producers? Do you feel like, maybe the industry at some point needs to be consolidated?
The industry is definitely under consolidation. There have been in the last 5 years nearly 50 US billions invested in order to consolidate that industry. This is all started by a German family office from the Rheinland family with their job, who started consolidating the industry by making so many acquisitions of so many brands around the world. And of course the leading company, Nestlé, did react with very bold acquisitions. So yes, there is a consolidation ongoing, and it's, I must say, it's a kind of a scary one on one side, but as it happens very often, at the same time you have the consolidation, you have the fragmentation on the opposite side. So now we are in the so-called third wave, where the so-called specialty coffee is a kind of now overcome by these micro roasters in little shops in towns operated by kind of coffee geeks, and they are very numerous. So, and the fact that the number of brands and possibilities for consumers is growing is only beneficial. Because at the end of the day, what really can make this industry exciting and successful, and both also creating value, is get the consumer engagement. And the more diversity, the more differentiation you can find in the market, the better the market.
Still to come, what kind of leadership does it take to grow a global coffee business sustainably? More with Andrea Illy next. Illy may be a quintessentially Italian brand, but its supply chain reaches across the globe. Its Arabica beans are grown in more than 40 regions across 4 continents. With an aim to sustainability, Illy founded the Università del Caffè, an initiative that works side by side with farmers, offering them free training to implement best practices with a low environmental impact. Andrea Illy is still with me. Were you always a coffee geek because of your family, or did you at some times think of not going into the coffee business?
I have the arrogance to describe myself as a coffee scientist, but this is only because of my background and how I spend my life. I'm a chemist by background, and I studied chemistry for the specific goal of knowing how to further improve quality. And this is why we work so much in the agronomical practices and all in the industrial processes, and also developing new technologies. So it's a little bit beyond the coffee geek.
So is that why you're so worried about sustainability? Is that the biggest risk for the coffee industry?
Sustainability is extremely relevant, both the socio-economical one, because we have to remember that coffee is loved and consumed by the rich countries. used to be 80% of the consumption in OECD countries. Now it's 50%. Thanks God, it's rebalancing with emerging countries and coffee-producing countries. But still, there would not be a coffee industry without the developed countries. US is the number one. Europe, as a macro region, is by far the number one with 2/3 of the coffee consumption. But 100% of the coffee is grown in the south of the world. In most of them are developing countries, still struggling. And this is not only not the only problem under development. The other big problem is that agricultural commodities are, for some reason, deflationary. Prices never go up, they go down. And on top of this, the coffee price is very, very volatile, triggered by different, let's say, factors, market factors, other than the coffee fundamental themselves. For instance, it's very much anchored to currency and to the price of oil. So that means that we really have to do great efforts in order to make this coffee sustainable for growers. Otherwise, they will run out of business. And we will, first of all, not get any quality any longer. And second, we also might have a shortage of production with a consequential price shock and so on.
But do you need the help of your competitors to try and, tackle this as a group?
Absolutely.
Together you're stronger when
Yes.
it comes to sustainability.
And from that perspective, the coffee industry, I would say, is cutting edge because, to my knowledge, there are not so many industries so cooperative at pre-competitive level in order to strengthen the industry. So the collaboration with the colleagues in the industry, this is one of the reasons why I call them colleagues and not competitors, is quite, let's say, extended to many, many areas. I give you an example. Even before talking about sustainability and now talking about climate change, which is the current threat, we have been able to reach incredible positive results with coffee and health. Because maybe 25 years ago, the belief was that coffee was maybe so-so for human health. Whereas now, after 25,000 scientific studies, all confirming that coffee is not bad for health, but is even let's say, directly correlated with longevity. So we can now say that coffee makes you live better and longer, and which is a great result.
But not everyone believes that.
This, but there are now scientific studies confirming that, and even scientific studies from the IRC, which is the International Agency for Research on Cancer, which did reclassify coffee more positively 2 years ago. And it's all great because, of course, this creates confidence also from emerging coffee consumers like China and India and Middle East, who now consume more coffee because it's good, and so on.
When you come to sustainability, can you give me a concrete example of something that you've worked on? So either in a specific country or in a specific project. This is not only about fair trade, right?
No, fair trade is, we'll talk later if you like, but the real, as I introduced before, the real, let's say, priority now is climate change. Because yes, coffee is impacted by climate change, twofolds, quality first and productivity second. It is already happening since a while. There have been countries with suffering big losses, and also countries making big investment in order to tackle.
So this is what, natural disasters, or the
can
climate.
Can be natural disaster, or can
that
even
hurts
be.
The problem.
As a matter of fact, the estimates are that 50% of the currently suitable land for coffee agriculture will not be suitable any longer in few decades, by 2050. So this is really significant because in the meantime, thanks to the positiveness of coffee that I just described, consumption are growing 2%. So by 2050, we'll need to produce twice as much as today with half of the suitable land. So that means that we really have to invest in agriculture in order to make this coffee agriculture resilient.
So this is different ways of harvesting coffee beans.
So yes, you introduce, first what we need to do is to improve the agronomical practices.
Yep.
Make them more sophisticated, more science-based, more technological empowered. Second, if this is not enough, we will need to develop new resistant cultivars, because there are cultivars which can be more adapted to the harsh conditions of climate change. And if these two, let's say, actions are still not sufficient, we will also need to develop new cultivation areas, like higher altitudes or higher latitudes. So all that will require big investment, and we need for sure to, let's say, allocate more investment in producing in the farms. Literally.
But this cannot only be a private practice, right? This has to be in partnership with, I guess, the public and the politicians.
Absolutely. This is why we are working together with the Swiss Coffee Trading Association, which is the world's largest, consolidating over 50% of the coffee trade, in order to have enough critical mass, and also with the big roasters and the ICO, International Coffee Organization, and all the relevant associations. We are trying to develop an organization in order to broker, in order to really attract resources, institutional, philanthropical, impact investment, in allocate those resources to, let's say, bankable projects in producing countries.
When I see the stamp fair trade, is it 100% true? Does it mean that I, as a consumer, am doing a little bit less evil for the world?
Fair trade has been, I believe it kind of belongs a little bit to the past. It has been a very good first step towards sustainability. But it's solidarity, it's not sustainability. It's a commitment to pay premium price to the coffee, which is the same as you would pay less on the marketplace. So it's a kind of a market distortion with which the consumer, by seeing a label, believes that this coffee is paid a fair price. But unfortunately, this expectation did neither create a huge consumption, because most of the consumer buy that coffee not for the quality, but because it's fair trade. So they tend to kind of limit their choice to sometimes, not always, you know. You take your preferred coffee and sometimes you take a fair trade one. And on the other side, the expectation that it created with growers created an oversupply. So the problem is that now there are too much certified coffee, and the premium became very, very thin. So this is why the system is a little bit broken, unfortunately, and we have to look ahead into certification schemes which are more sophisticated, really certifying the sustainability of the supply chain, not only the solidarity.
Up next, representing Italy in style. We talk Andrea Illy's mission of promoting luxury companies from Fendi to Ferrari. Next. As well as acting as chairman of the company that bears his name, Andrea Illy also leads the ALTAGAMMA Foundation. Its mission? To increase the competitiveness of high-end Italian brands from food to fashion. Some of its members include Ferragamo, Fendi, and Ducati. Today, Italian brands make up 10% of total consumption of luxury goods across the world. How can they preserve and grow that market share? Mr. Illy, thank you so much for still being with us. When you look at the Italian magic, there are very many Italian high-end names. And this is despite the political turmoil that we saw in the last 40, 50 and more years. What is the secret sauce that Italy has?
Well, Italy has an enormous heritage. It's such a wealth in nature and whatever is intangible in culture. We are the country of beauty, though, because of and we are at the very center of the cradle of civilization, the Mediterranean, with a millenary culture. So with all this kind of, let's say, natural competitive advantage, there has been so much beauty and heritage sedimenting in the country, which still inspires the creativity and the ingenious also in terms of technology and innovation of our best minds. And so with that, this luxury market is great because it's over 1 trillion, and Italy is a co-leader together with our colleague in France. But we have 2 great strong points. We are the countries with the highest amount of sectors in luxury. Actually, we miss only one, which is consumer electronics. Other than that, we have all. Automotive, you didn't mention Ferrari, Lamborghini. We have nautic, we have aeronautic, jewelry, sport, food, hospitality, and so on. I don't want to mention them all. And the other great competitive advantage we have is that we are the country where the product is made.
Yeah.
Creativity and craftsmanship.
The Italian companies look at further expanding. Have they gotten better at scaling up?
They shall, and we are. This is the purpose of the ALTAGAMMA Foundation: is to how to strengthen competitiveness and grow. We have ideas how to double that business, which is already a direct contribution to the Italian GDP, 5%. We believe that there are huge synergy with tourism, by example, because that industry, the brands that you were mentioning before, among the other 100 of them, are the best cultural ambassador of the Italian lifestyle. So people fall in love with Italy, with the products, brands, point of sale abroad, and then they are willing to visit our country and discover the beauty. And, you know, tourism is gigantic because it's a 10% world GDP. If you have a leadership position in that industry, you have a significant contribution to the GDP. There is another great opportunity which is now, let's say, facing up to our country, which is the new Silk Road, which is involving 8 trillion investment in the decades ahead. And Italy, as we all know, has always been a significant, let's say, hub for the Silk Road, and this is another great opportunity. So we don't lack opportunities, though.
No, we certainly don't lack opportunities. With opportunities also comes hard work. How many coffees do you have a day, and what kind of coffee to stay on top of it all?
I have an average of 4. It can be 3
what,
or 5.
Espressos, cappuccinos?
Espresso, cappuccino. In summer I have cold brew. The new one is the cold brew, which I love, absolutely. And or a shakerato. So, but generally pure coffee, no milk.
All right, Andrea Illy, thank you so much.
Thank you. My pleasure, Francine.